Hi, welcome. This tutorial is going to be a brief overview of what to expect, pretty much inform you what ArmA is, what ArmA isn't, and how to get set up and get some things underway. I thought I'd put this together for some friends that were a little hesitant, and pretty much stymie some myths and some and pretty much point out some of the legendary points of the game. So, first and foremost, what ArmA isn't. ArmA is not one of these arcade first-person shooters where it doesn't have just really simple ballistics, where it doesn't have penetration. Basically, this game, what it is a simulator of ballistics, I like to say. Whether it's a simulator of aircraft, that depends on the mod. It depends on the mode that is running at that time, the difficult settings you set as well. Um, what it also is a very highly moddable game in every aspect that you can imagine. This is definitely not the cookie cutter of Call of Duty, Battlefield, and the list goes on of all the different shooters out there. This allows a lot more customization and curtailing for the player. It also allows a lot of depth to grow into. You don't need to know the overly complicated mess as it first appears to be. It can be very off-putting to a lot of players because a lot of players don't want to get or put a lot of time in getting it set up. They want to get into game. They want to play. This whole tutorial is to do that. Um, Needless to say, I'm going to point out some key aspects to know that will help make things make sense and kind of build the overall package. As you can see here, I've got the Steam client open, and you of course pick this up somewhere in the store page. That's where you can get additional DLC, what have you. And if you're looking for other DLC, look for those times where you can get it on sale. From time to time, they'll have sales where it drastically cuts the price. Now, some ask, for a game that's been out since 2013, when's the next one coming along and should I even invest in buying this? Yes, you should, because the next iteration of ARMA is probably not but 2 years off. And plus, ARMA still has some room to kind of play with. It's always been that way, and it's been great in that sense. If you ever want to take a look, go take a look in the community radar section right here, as you can see, and you'll be able to see all the different mods, the different communities that are involved, what they're doing, what have you, right? I would suggest you want to just take a dabble what's going out there in the recent pattern. Click on this and it'll put you out there. The other thing is that you want to go over to Workshop. Workshop's where you're going to find mods and what have you. As you can see, there's several right here that are listed, right? You got the F-18 Hornet, you got a bunch of different things. You can have single jets, you can have whole packs full of vehicles and systems and what have you. That would be categorized as, say, mod. Scenarios are going to be more of scenarios as in, like, say, Old Man. Old Man is kind of a single player game mode that you can play through, and it's got kind of a story, what have you. That's why you have so many scenarios, 62,000 of them. You're basically given a map, and the map is a sandbox that where you can create the environment in it. A lot of times there's some default stuff there, but then there's a lot of stuff that people have created, and that's what makes ArmA shine the most. Bohemia basically gave us the community. Here you go. Here's some basics. Do whatever you're going to do with it. We'll give you some flexibility, right? So with flexibility comes a lot of things. You can see there's 1,000 helicopter mods, just for instance, 641 boats. You just name it, 1,000 planes, what have you. Then there's things like this where it has sound, right? And where the sound can actually manipulate how the bullets sound or different items in inventory could sound, right? Or sound like, right? So that's what this is. This is just a sound mod. Now, if you pick and find a mod, you see this button right here? When you subscribe to it immediately, you'll notice that it's downloading down at the bottom. It'll go ahead and download. And what's the beauty of it is, of these mods is, if you ever needed to update, it'll update for you. Just maintain a connection with Steam, you're good to go. Um, now, going back, let's go back to the root here and get back into ArmA itself. There's a workshop, as you can see. You can also subscribe to some of these workshop items in the web page and then move forward there, right? So just keep that in mind. You can browse on the internet, get on the web page, and look at the variety of different things, or you can go to the workshop here. Now, when we first launch ArmA, by hitting play, you'll notice that it just doesn't jump right into a game. Here we have a launcher. Now, as you can see, mine is set where I can go from mods right straight in, right? Or I can go to mods right off, or my parameters or news. You can actually start off with any one of these sections. Every one of these sections is very important. Dashboard allows you to pick your units and what have you in a variety of different things. Here, I went ahead and created a group at one time, and you can see that I'm not using it at this time, hoping that some friends will jump in and maybe this will go active one day. There's third-party content. This is where they're basically advertising the workshop. News, this is where you get news that's up to date about what they're doing with ArmA, some of the fixes right here, spot reps, it's like a game update. And then sit rep is where there's certain things in the community that are going. DLC, all the DLC that you buy tend to automatically enable, but some of the others like contact and global mobilization are optional and they do not activate manually, right? Parameters. Here's some of the parameters that you can set. Now, you can see that I have a list of these. These may differ. You can go into all parameters and you can enable some of these things. Now, I would look at the little description, or what you can do is go to do a simple search on the internet for what that does. This right here skips the splash screen at the beginning and allows a quicker load and a variety of different other things. Now, say for instance, I want to list out some of these things that are not on this front favorites page, and I want to be able to access them very easily. You can come right over here and you can put add it to your favorites. Like you'll see a star, you'll just click on it, and then it'll get a little slash like so. Doing that makes it over here, and then you can easily manage it as well. Some of the settings I have set here, if you've got an 8 core or higher, and you want to map it out accordingly, you can either allow ArmA to automatically detect your cores or what have you, or you can dictate what you're using right here. As a test, when I first upgraded my computer recently, I decided to map it out to 12 because I only thought that it would map to 8. I looked in the file recently, and a little caveat is that it recognized the 24 threads that this processor that I have currently has. I'm currently running a 3900X, and I could not be more pleased with this. The more threads, the more CPU count, that's the greatest, right? This game is multi-threading. If you don't want to map them out, I would suggest anything over 8 threads, right? Go ahead and check all these boxes. You'll check this one, and then you'll be able to see these 3. You can look to see what these are. I'm not going to get into the details, but also enable hyper-threading so that it can recognize that you have extra threads per core, right? And then there's some of these others. Don't worry about setting these, not unless you have a large amounts of memory, okay? Then you can use this. I'm currently using 32 gigabytes. If you're going with anything 16 and higher, I would suggest go ahead and map this out. Next, mods. When you subscribe to those mods, they're going to pop in here, right? And then you'll see them list out below. As you can see, the unchecked, it's pretty obvious. These are enabled. These are available, right? The second part is that if your friends give you a file, and they say, hey, I've got all these mods. You want to get all these mods that I have or that I use to join the server. You'll want to go to this area right here, see more, and what you can do is you can import a list. It'll take an XML file and it'll go ahead and automatically subscribe or enable those mods so that you can join that server or join your friends in doing whatever, right? Next, BattleEye. This is super important, very important, and I hope that all that watch this do not skip this message. This is very important because it may affect your gameplay and for the best experience. you want to whitelist BattleEye and the launcher and the main game through your firewall application that you're using. Do not miss this step. You do not, what the thing you do not want to happen is when you do get in the game, you're on the server, you're flying a jet or you're learning to fly something and you're doing pretty good, and then all of a sudden the server can't communicate back to your service, the BattleEye service that's running on the computer, and when it can't make a connection, it defaults to boot you from the server. Sometimes you'll get a message and sometimes you won't. I would suggest at this point, if you're setting it up, go ahead and go down to, at the very minimum, if you're not running Avast or any other application, go in here, go to Firewall, and simply allow an app through the firewall. Okay. When you go in here, change your settings, right, and then allow add another app, right. Browse to wherever your Steam location is. Just so happens to be on my F drive right here, right. Go into Steam library. Now the default location, if you just installed Steam and you didn't create a different library where you can save Steam to another drive, say you have a faster drive or you have a couple SSDs and you're trying to balance some space, be sure to look where you initially installed it, right? So you'll go to wherever the Steam library is, Steam Apps, Common, ArmA 3, and you're going to look for the executables listed here. You don't need to enable all of them. You're not running as a server, and you're not running 32-bit. You'll want to run ArmA 3 64exe, that's the main game, and yes, through the main game, it does connect to the server. So you want to have an even flow of that, of data, right? And it only allows this application and opens up for that application specifically. This is not just opening up a bunch of ports. It'll allow that application through the firewall. Plus, you'll be presented later on, and if you're running Windows, and you're going to get this little pop-up that says, hey, do you want to allow this application? The worst thing you want to do is have that happen in the middle of a game and what have you. So go ahead and map out these three. ArmA 3 underscore 64. This is BattleEye, which I was just talking about. And ArmA 3 launcher right here. Go ahead, no, you can't, unfortunately, you can't select all three and hit open. You got to do one by one, but once you hit open, it'll come to the screen and then add, and then it'll end up populating here. You'll see ArmA 3 launcher, and then I believe BattleEye somewhere in here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Even though I didn't make any changes. So that's on BattleEye. Make sure it works. This is where troubleshooting, if you're having problems with BattleEye, you'll see messages displayed here. Caveat, there is certain games that there are certain antivirus and internet security packages you want to also, not only in the firewall portion, but go ahead and enable exceptions for the antivirus for those executables. Heck, I would go ahead and do it for the whole ArmA 3 folder if you wanted to. You can always do every antivirus application I've ever dealt with in my IT experience, you should be able to go back and you can actually do scans on the folder manually. Okay? If you are really concerned about getting malicious content, you can go ahead and scan it. Now, I will tell you, though, with Steam Workshop, they do a lot of scans on their content, okay? And if they find hashes that match any kind of malicious software, viruses, worms, whatever else, they instantly remove it. I've talked to a couple guys that help manage, and the way they manage this from worms and all that stuff from spreading is because they do check up against signatures of known viruses, and they continually do scans and what have you. They have a pretty fleshed out security environment. So with that being said, if you want to go ahead and add exceptions, you'll be fine. You won't have any other complications that will always crop up later down the road. I've had some friends that quit ArmA, would not play anymore because they were having lots of complications that were usually caused by this. Servers. Once you have some servers laid out, what you can do, you can go to the internet, you can find servers. They're very easy. What you can do is you come in here, you can populate a server name. Like I have Chronic here. I like playing on their servers. Actually, Hint, clue, clue. I manage the servers. So, but anyhow, you can find the servers easily by some keywords. And as you can see, they're starting to list on up. And then they'll populate. And just some common terminology, and you'll be able to find the servers. Once you're done and you find some servers that you like, you can go right here and you can add them to your favorites, and they'll populate over here, like so. I've got a bunch of servers here. It's not only just Chronic. I got OFPS, really great community, and my buddy that has an up-and-coming game mode that a lot of you may like. We'll have more on this coming in the future. Currently, this is in beta, and it's for testing, and he has it available out there if you want to join on it and give it a try. But anyways, this is the basics of the interface right here, getting started. We're not going to load any mods. We're not going to load it onto any servers. Instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to launch in the game so you can get some basics in the game itself. I would suggest doing this first before joining any server, because if you get on a server, there is some times where they'll be running some security on the server where it won't allow you to adjust some settings. Okay, so I would suggest at least launch ArmA once, get some of the stuff fleshed out. You may not have to go in and set up all your controls. I would say that try out some of the basic controls and some of the basic tutorials first, and then map your keys that you use in other games into your play style. Okay, starting off with that, here you have is single player. You have campaigns and whatever. For small little challenges, you can do challenges right here. Remember how I was talking about mod scenarios? This is where you can play other people's single player scenarios. Or you can open up the map editor and take a look, just like so, right? Here in multiplayer, you can browse, this is another server browser. So if you say you wanted to load in, you want to do some settings, see if you can find your favorite server, you can go there too. One thing I want to show you, though, is that you can separately favorite some of your servers. Those favorites won't necessarily sync up here. So just the same, if you're looking for servers, you just go out to Internet right here. That's these blocks right here. These are tabs. They're not just there for looks. You can actually browse over them, and you can see different areas where you can connect to. If you go to Internet, of course, in just a little bit here, it should flesh out. Let's see here. Usually you probably have to hit the refresh button, and it will try to flesh out some servers. Okay. Well, those guys show up. That's what was the problem. See here, I'll go ahead and just put in Chronic for the host. That is server name. And then it'll go through and it'll start showing a couple of our servers. Sometimes it takes a while for it to parse in the game. I would suggest if you're trying to find a server, do it from the launcher. So much easier to find those servers that way. This way is kind of piggish and slow and whatnot. But if you notice, there's like little stars right here, right? So I'm going to go here and see, this has been a server that I want to join. Say if I want to join that regularly, I can go ahead and start there. There's also where you can go on to recent, and they'll populate so. So you just come over here to this little star, click it, and it's added to your favorites. This is good because, say for instance, you leave the server and you want to know where you were at and how do I get back on it. This is a good methodology, all right, if you find one of your favorite servers. All right, I'm going to back out, go back to the main screen here. Now, multiplayer, Apex Protocol is kind of like playing a campaign with other people. It goes in sections, and it's pretty cool. If you're new and you're wanting to look at some basic things that just play and kind of get adjusted, that's a good place to start too. Once you want to get on. But I'm kind of going in reverse order of what you should go through because I wanted to show you some of these features first, right? Then tutorials. Here we have, you can go through the full fleshed out campaign, the tutorial campaign, and go to boot camp, or you can do simplistic VR training. VR training is pretty good, and it goes through the variety of different game mechanics. Um, I would at least suggest open up boot camp, see what it's about. It might actually be pretty cool and to your liking to kind of explore more, right? But once you're done with that, VR training is a good place for just general functionality in the game. Say you're trying to figure out like how the hell did I do this or how do you do this? Go to VR training. A lot of it's fleshed out there, and some of it you got to research and read on their wiki pages on Bohemia's wiki. All right. Here's Virtual Arsenal. I'll get into that in just a second, but here's some of the other things. Here's Field Manual. Here's the hints and tips and tricks. Very helpful as well. You'll see these pop up from time to time. If you ever, when you're going through the tutorials and you want to see that again, hit H. H will help you open up those things. Then here's some community guides, and there's actually a community guide series that this guy named Dyslexy put together. He's well known. He gives some really fleshed out, really good summaries on some things to know, and they're really easy to follow and really cool. Actually, I, I commend him for doing that. And Dyslexy buddy, I remember you from the ArmA 2 days, and I appreciate your efforts, buddy. All right, so options. Options. Here are video, and this is where you want to really kind of tune your performance. Some people have said, oh, ArmA is a performance hog and it's badly coded, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it needs a lot because it has a lot, right? There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of graphics, there's a lot of good things that are going on. However, there's a lot of calculations. This game is more CPU centric than it is GPU centric, right? So especially if you have a system where your processor is bottlenecking your GPU, you're going to have a massive impact in performance, okay? And what I mean by that is that if, like for instance, I had a 1080 Ti, right? And I was using a AMD 9590. Thought it was a great processor, had its good days, but in ArmA, I always kind of felt like I got mediocre performance from it. Now I've upgraded to a 3900X, and this thing spikes to 200 plus. It's crazy. Some of the frames I get. The reason why it's depicting 60 frames also right here, right, is because I got the frames locked out due to me downscaling the resolution of my monitor. I did this for the video, so that's why you're seeing it's locking out at 60. Normally, when I run this at 3840 by 1080, I'm generally getting about anywhere between 144 to 200 frames per second in the interface. Note about that. If you notice that you're getting really high frames here, but you go join a server or you're playing a scenario, a custom scenario, they might have a lot of scripts that are running in the background. And remember what I said about CPU centric. Means that you have a lot of depth at different functions. And what I mean by functions, it's not just this mysterious thing that's happening in the background you don't even see. You actually may have some built out custom interface objects that make it look like, hey, it's a totally different game. That's what's great about ArmA. You'll have a totally different interface than what you see right here. It'll look like it came from freaking Star Wars. Yes, they do have Star Wars for ArmA. And they have many other games that are similar and have overlaps, right? But point being is these scripts may not be optimized, or they might be optimized and they just crammed a lot in. So if you see this frame drop, it's beautiful here, but or you're balancing on 60, but you jump into a server and it's like 20 frames per second, and you're wondering what happened. That is why. Okay. It's not necessarily something that's badly coded. It's not necessarily that that's horrible. It's just that they might be having a lot of things going on and your processor's really choking. But hey, you ask, I've got a 2080 Ti and I've got an i7 that I've had for a few years. Why am I getting crappy performance? Well, this is where maybe you need to do a little bit of tweaking and understand. Go do a Google search for bottlenecking There's like a bottlenecking application out there where you can put your graphics card up against your specific processor. Be sure to use your model exactly, because there's could be a difference between a desktop processor, right, and its many different iterations, or a mobile processor. So check to see if there might be bottlenecking involved or something along those lines. So enough on that. Now, considering graphics here, what you can do is you can up the sampling or you can down tune it, which to your pleasure. Texture, I would suggest that texture, object, and terrain start out with a basis of high. Yes, high. But hey, wouldn't it be better to put it on medium? Start with high because, as I said, this game is not so much graphics centric. It's mostly CPU. Setting it to high, you may have the same performance as you have it on medium, but you tweak something else that helped you out. So start with high, then go down to things like shadow, set that to low. If you're noticing that your frames are not that high, tweak out your particles, shadow, cloud, pip, and these other settings here. HDR, dynamic, and water reflections. Water reflections really kick your butt. Even though you auto detect might say ultra, whoa, watch it. Pipe that down, you'll see the frame counter go way up. Same with dynamic lights, HDR, and a few of these. Start tweaking, try to bring this down to where you keep it at a good medium while maintaining quality. Also, visibility. Visibility, this is in meters, by the way. So my visibility is up to 5 kilometers, right? That's overall, right? But then you have objects too. Make sure that these are pretty close in sync, because you'll notice that objects disappear at a certain distance and wonder why. But I can see further out. That's where this comes in hand. Make sure these are in pair. Shadow, that's where you have a shadow underneath your guy or whatever else. I generally set this to 50. You really don't see anything, and plus it only ramps up to about 100. Display, this is where you set your resolution here, aspect, VSync, and other things. Little tip for you on VSync. If you're struggling on performance, go ahead and disable this until you see some image tearing, right? If you don't see any image tearing and this is disabled, hey, it's all the better. It's not going to break anything. You'll actually benefit from some performance. Some monitors and TVs are they really complain about this, and you start to see some tearing. And tearing is where the image at the bottom or at a string horizontally across the screen doesn't match up with it above it. It's like moving, but they're kind of just not stitched together correctly, right? If you're starting to see that, go ahead and enable this and try to tweak elsewhere. AA and PP, this is where you might want to pause the video and take a screenshot or just take a look at some of the settings that I'm using. I'm not saying these are the best, but for my playstyle, I do not like the blurry effects when you turn the screen left and right, and I don't like the edges being a little bit blurred. I like it to be really clear all across the screen, but maybe a little bit of effects. So I've turned some of those things off and turned some of these things on, right? And so here are some of the tweaks. A tip for you too, if you're struggling on performance, these are some of the things you want to play with. Not so much these things. There is these right here in caustics and whatnot, but I would tweak more of these things, then come over here. These areas won't really impact performance, just to tell you. Here's brightness and contrast and saturation. That's not really affect performance, but you might need to dim something or make it brighter, depending on your display. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bounce out of that. The other thing where you can benefit from performance is your sound sources. If you can ramp that down, I'm using a dedicated sound card, and I upgraded my processor, and I'm not really having any problems. I'm having some really high frame rates. So I've been tempted to ramp this back up. You might see 96. You can pipe this all the way down to 24 and 43, or I'm sorry, 24 and 32 without really noticing any kind of difference in the sound and the makeup in the background. If you noticed, I hear some wind, right? Those are some of the effects that I'm talking about in the environment. You'll hear things like that. You'll hear birds. sticks, people talking in the distance, what have you, or even music for that matter. But this right here and adjusting this you'll benefit from. Music, of course, as it says, it's music. They got great music in this, but I tend to pipe it down for overall just getting in game and whatnot. So, all right. Some of the other things, controls. You don't have to. The common issue I've heard from a lot of people is, "Oh God, you got to have a college degree to learn this game." You really don't. You really actually don't. It makes a lot of sense. Okay. Um, you don't need to be really too technical. I know some really simple people. I'll just say that have really taken to this game and understood it. So it doesn't really need a brainiac. And it doesn't take too long. It's like any other game. You just map it out your custom controls. What I would suggest doing is use the basic controls that you know from other first-person shooters, and then learn some of the existing keys a little. Learn what they are and what they do. I'm saying, but then once you do, then curtail it to your liking. There's really a lot that's very overlapping. Also, if you know me directly, hit me up. I might be able to shoot you a settings file where it'll have some of the settings I felt that has like an overlap between games like Ghost Recon, Grand Theft Auto, Battlefield, a few other things, and I've kind of done a mix of some of those settings I've used over the years. Um, so there's common, which you'll see right here. You'll have some of your basic things. It'll give you like a little description of each of them. But also you have weapons that do different things, right? View, where you can do different views. Command, multiplayer, what have you, right? And then you can scroll over here on the right. There's some other things like custom controls, which I'll get into at some other point. But just remember that if you're setting up a mod and it says, hey, do you want to map this to a custom control? If someone's going through a tutorial and they're talking about it, this is where you go. You go into controls, drop this down, go down to custom controls, and this is where you'll be able to map it out. All right, so some of the other things. Here in options, you'll notice game, right? This is some of your general things. Just like any other game, you're either enabling blood or other things. Be careful on setting some of this stuff up. I would say just leave it alone. One little feature that I would very highly suggest to a lot of players, both new and intermediate players that haven't played this that well, and they haven't really messed with aiming dead zone, I would suggest in doing that. What that allows you to do is when you look with the cursor, your body moves, your torso moves, and your arms move like in real time, right? Like your body would really move. Instead of like other first person shooters where your guy pivots on his body, right? All the time. This allows for you to twist and turn and look at things. It also gives you a tactical advantage at times where you could be in a certain position and you don't want to move your whole body, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. Helicopter flight model, I would leave this alone for a bit. Don't do the advanced. It's kind of fun with certain mods, and you want immersion, and you want a sim kind of time at the environment. This is great to enable. Difficulty. This, as it says, will adjust some of these settings. If you highlight some of these things, it'll give you a sample of what some of these things do, if you noticed, right? And it's helpful to understand. Like it'll put a marker or whatever else, right? And some of these things you want to enable. Some of these things, if you want to pause, this is where I've set some of these items, and it might be further helpful to you in setting these up. Some of these are actually pretty default as well. Colors, if you want to customize the interface, I would leave ArmA the way it is. There's several different profiles you can pick from right here, right? And that leads over to layout. There's different kinds of layouts that you can go with. Mine's not showing them right now, but let's see here. Let's go back to layout. Here you can see where all the buttons are and where they have different things that pop up. I would not suggest in modifying this. leave the layout where it's at, and then understand the why the positioning's there. Like here is your player and all the different things that have to associate with the player, and then here's vehicle statuses, and this is fuel usage. This is default. Some of the mods might have their own way of doing it, but while we're here, I'm going to point out a couple basics with these two because this is important to know and be able to jump right into the game. Here you have current weapon. This little bar right here depicts what your weapon mode is, whether it's a single 3-round burst, as that's depicting, or fully auto, which it'll be maxed out right here. This is the how many bullets are in the chamber and in the magazine. This is how many magazines you have, right? So you have 10 of 30 right there. This right here is a grenade, and this shows you have 2 grenades right there. If you hit Control G, you'll be able to cycle through those things. And this is just weapon info right here. That's elevation of what your current scope is set at. You can adjust your elevation by going up and down. Using a laser designator or a rangefinder, you can spot the target or laze the target, that is. I'm not talking about a laser, but you can shoot the distance to know what distance you're about to snipe somebody out, for instance. And then you use page up and page down to gain your elevation. This is all the vehicle right here. These little boxes, once vehicles get damaged, these will light up and tell you where it's been damaged. Some of these things will allow you to know about what the status is of some of these items, right? And there's different tutorials that'll tell you all these different items and what they mean. So, anyways, hope that helped. I'll go ahead and back out of this. And, well, this is ArmA. This is the basics of getting started. Once you know all these things, you know the basics, you know where everything is at, you know what they do, what they mean, instead of firing up the game and just not knowing a thing, right? This will help you understand some of the basics. Before I leave, I want to point out a couple things. If you notice these different kinds of icons right here, you'll notice that these are different things that are lit up. These are different DLC that have been enabled. Now, most of the DLC, as you can see, have been enabled right here, right? That you have. If you're missing any one of these, right, and you purchased it, you need to talk to Steam or validate your files and make sure that you got these things enabled. This right here is Steam Workshop, and you'll see different icons that depict all the different mods that you'll have. And sometimes when you click on them, it'll give you info. Here, we can actually go over to, where is it at? Expansions, right? When I click on that, it will show us the different things that are there, right? And a little description and maybe the website for them, right? If a mod team has a website. You'll see beyond the regular DLC, you'll see some other mods that pop up here. All right, that should cover it. If you want to follow us a little bit more later, we'll have videos on how to get in the game, the basics of the gameplay, and other things. If you want to learn more about the game, they have a great VR training session. I'm going to go ahead and launch it so you can kind of see what's going on and point out some pretty much some basics. When you launch it, you might start out different than this. There might be a guide that walks you through the variety of different things. Okay? If you want to try some of the things after you're done, all you have to do is select some of the different items right there, right? And then all you do is basically shoot it. Now, getting into one of these, they just kind of go over the basics of anything else. You may be looking around, but like I was saying, on the right, you see the helper, right? You can hide this, or you can re-enable it and bring it back. Now, this guy, as depicted, is at 196, right? 196 meters. As you can see, right? So, right? Now, How can I shoot that guy a little bit more effectively? And what am I doing? I'm just right clicking and I'm zooming in, right? Right? Nope. When I tap the right click, I go into this. But if I tap it again, it'll cycle through. It'll cycle between the different modes and the mode types. And when I'm in this mode, I can hold it down and I can zoom in just a little bit, right? And it's depicted over here on the right. But this is to get you started. Now, on the number pad, right, I can switch between the different types of scopes. So I can go into the scope and you can see what's in it, right? And I can go to the outward where it's more of a tactical type scope for up close and personal. Another thing that they're telling you in this guide also is that you can double tap the minus key, or you can hold down the minus key and get a better perspective away, right? Now, and sometimes, if you notice, I'm trying to double tap it, and it keeps on zooming back. Sometimes certain scopes allow you to double tap it, and it locks further out, or zoom in. See how it locks? They just won't let you zoom out further, right? But what you can do is you can double tap the plus on the number pad, and you can see in right further. Or we can go here and actually, since this scope doesn't allow any more zooming, right? You can't zoom in anymore. There's different types of scopes that'll help. But as you can see, the target's at 196. I'm currently up at the top. If you remember, I pointed out what the elevation is. I can adjust that by with my page up, page down, right? But this particular weapon won't allow us to. It's locked in at 300. Now with this guy being at 196, I've got to shoot just a little bit lower, right? Not necessarily, because sometimes it's pretty much going off the fact that it may just go straight on at that little tiny sight right there. Now here's something for you too. Notice how I'm bouncing around, right? And it goes with the breathing. This can be combated in several ways. You see this right here? I can walk up to it, and notice how up in the top right there was a box, right? There's nothing there. And then I walk up, and there's see how it has that, looks like almost like I could put out a tripod? Yes, you can actually bipod out, right? And then you're attached. Now, if I look in, I'm not moving around hardly, right? Now I can take on zero on this target, and there he goes. Down. Dude's down. Simple as that. End of the tutorial. That's how quickly these things are. So that's why I would suggest that you go into, you go back to hub, and then done. That's how quickly some of these actual tutorials run. So you can learn a lot in such a quick, short amount of time. Weapon handling, or exit right there, and then a variety of different things that you can do, right? Okay, well that concludes this tutorial, and I'm going to go ahead and exit on out.